He served me divorce papers thinking he'd won, but I'd already served his crimes to the board on a silver platter. What he didn't know was that my sister and I had one final, devastating account to settle.
The cranberry sauce was still glistening when Marcus set his wine glass down with that deliberate click that meant business. The football game droned from the living room where my cousin Darius and Uncle Joe were arguing about the Falcons' defense. My sister Kenya's sweet potato pie sat untouched on the china cabinet, its cinnamon scent mixing with the collard greens and the distant memory of my grandmother's cornbread recipe that I'd spent 3 hours perfecting. 3 generations of black women in this kitchen, and I'd finally mastered the damn cornbread. That should have been the victory of the day. Should have been. Marcus cleared his throat and I thought he was going to propose a toast. We'd been married 7 years, together for 10, and he always made a speech at Thanksgiving. About gratitude. About family. About us. Instead he reached into the breast pocket of his Brooks Brothers blazer. That same navy one I'd helped him pick out at Lenox Square last Christmas. The one that set us back $400 but made him look like the CFO he was. And pulled out papers. Not a single sheet. Thick. Folded once, crisp, legal-sized. I was holding the serving spoon for the mac and cheese, the one with the ceramic handle my mother gave us as a wedding gift, when he said it. No preamble. No softening. Just the words landing like hot grease on skin. I'm in love with your sister. The spoon clattered against the Pyrex dish. Not because I was shocked. Not really. But because he'd finally said it out loud. In front of my mother, who'd just taken her first bite of turkey and now sat frozen, fork halfway to her mouth. In front of my aunties, Patrice from Birmingham with her 2 red lipstick, and Denise who'd flown in from Dallas and already had too much of that cheap Moscato she brought. In front of Kenya herself, who'd been standing by the sink running water over dishes, her back turned to the table like she'd been practicing that posture for months. The papers landed 3 inches from my water glass. Hard enough to make the ice cubes shift. Divorce summons. State of Georgia Superior Court. Marcus Elijah Carter versus Aaliyah Nicole Carter. I looked at his face. Really looked. The same face I'd traced with my fingers in the dark after his father died last spring. The same jawline I'd kissed when he got promoted to Vice President of Finance at Meridian Solutions. The same eyes that had watched me give birth to our son Jalen, now 5 years old and upstairs napping with his cousins, wearing the little bow tie I'd tied crooked because he wouldn't hold still. Kenya turned off the faucet. The silence that followed was the kind that happens in black households when someone forgets their place. When someone airs dirty laundry where white people might see. Except there were no white people here. Just us. Just family. Just blood and betrayal served up with candied yams. I picked up the papers. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. They should have shaken. Years of therapy after Daddy left us, after Mama worked double shifts at Grady Hospital housekeeping, after Kenya and I shared a bedroom until I was 18 and she was 16 and I finally got a scholarship to Spelman while she stayed home and took care of Grandma. That therapy taught me about nervous system responses. About trauma. About how the body keeps score. My hands should have been trembling like Mama's did when the doctor told her about the diabetes. But they were steady. Steadier than they'd been in years. Marcus's signature covered the last page. Bold. Looping. The same signature he'd practiced in college, wanting it to look important. Kenya's name wasn't on the papers. Not yet. But I saw the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. How her fingers, those long elegant fingers that looked like they should be playing piano instead of typing purchase orders at the same damn company where my husband worked, gripped the edge of the granite countertop we'd installed last year. The granite I'd picked out. The one Marcus said was too expensive but I'd insisted on because I was tired of those laminate counters that bubbled up when you set a hot pot down. I'd paid for half with my bonus from the accounting firm. My bonus. My money. My counters. The irony tasted like ashes from the cigarettes I'd quit when I got pregnant with Jalen. Mama found her voice first. Low and dangerous the way it got when Kenya and I fought over clothes as teenagers. When Daddy's check didn't come. When the landlord threatened eviction. That voice had survived the projects off Cleveland Avenue. It had survived Reaganomics and the crack epidemic and watching her sisters die from cancers the doctors didn't catch early enough because who had time for mammograms when you were working 3 jobs? That voice could cut glass. Marcus, what did you just say to my daughter? But Marcus was looking at me. Only me. Like we were the only 2 people in the room. Like we hadn't built this life together. Like I hadn't helped him study for the CPA exam while working full-time and planning our wedding. Like I hadn't covered his car payment that month after his promotion when they delayed his raise. Like I hadn't lied to his mother about where he was those nights he said he was working late but his breath smelled like whiskey and secrets. I need this to happen fast, Aaliyah. Meridian's merging with Westbrook Industries in January. The board reviews personal conduct clauses before finalizing executive positions. So that's what this was. Not love. Not passion. Not some grand romance that couldn't be denied. It was a spreadsheet calculation. A risk assessment. A strategic detachment. Kenya was the liability. I was the clean break. The necessary evil. The line item to be removed before the auditors came calling. I set the papers down next to my plate. The plate I'd filled with exactly the portions Marcus liked. Extra stuffing. No cranberry sauce because he said it was too sweet. I'd remembered. After 10 years I'd remembered every detail. While he'd been remembering my sister's perfume. Her laugh. The way she probably didn't nag him about leaving his sneakers by the door or his dirty plates on the counter or the fact that he hadn't initiated sex since March and I'd been too tired to care because Jalen had pneumonia and I'd been up every night checking his breathing. Kenya finally turned around. Her eyes were dry. That surprised me too. My baby sister always cried. Cried when Mama couldn't afford the light bill. Cried when her first boyfriend cheated. Cried when Grandma's dementia got so bad she didn't know who we were anymore. But now with our family splintering over her grandmother's tablecloth, Kenya's face was a mask. I'd seen that expression once before. On a woman at Grady Hospital waiting room, the night Daddy got shot over a dice game. That woman had been waiting for news about her son. She already knew he was gone. Her face just hadn't caught up to the truth yet. The cranberry sauce was congealing. The collard greens would be cold. Jalen would be waking up soon, confused why the house was so quiet. Confused why Auntie Kenya's car wasn't in the driveway where she'd parked it that morning, her Audi A4 that Marcus had co-signed for. The Audi I just realized was registered to our joint address. Just like the cable bill. Just like the mortgage. Just like everything I'd thought was ours but was really just his, waiting for this moment. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood we'd refinished ourselves last summer. Saved $6,000 doing it. I'd sanded until my arms ached. Until the dust settled in my hair and Marcus had laughed and called me his little contractor. Kenya had helped pick the stain. Dark walnut. Said it would hide the scratches from Jalen's toy cars. She'd been thinking about my son's future while sleeping with his father. I need to check on Jalen, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Someone calmer. Someone who hadn't just had her marriage murdered at her own dining room table. Marcus reached for my wrist. The way he used to when we were dating and he'd pull me close in the movie theater. When his touch meant safety. When his fingers circling my wrist was a promise, not a prison. We can discuss this civilly. For Jalen's sake. For Jalen's sake. Those 3 words. The shield every black parent uses when they want to justify their weakness. When they want to make their children carry the weight of adult decisions. I'd heard Mama say it when she let Daddy come back the 3rd time. When she dropped the restraining order. When she cashed her tax return to pay his bail instead of fixing the transmission on our Oldsmobile. For the children's sake. Always for the children, which really meant for the adults who didn't want to face what they'd done. I pulled away. My wrist came free easily. Another surprise. Should have been harder. Should have left marks. But his grip was loose, already gone. Already belonging to someone else. When I got to the staircase I heard Mama's voice behind me. Not talking to Marcus. Talking to Kenya. Girl, you better explain yourself before I get up from this table. But Kenya wouldn't explain. Not yet. Not until the board meeting. Not until the auditors saw what I'd found. What I'd been finding for 6 months while Marcus thought I was too busy with quarterly reviews and Jalen's kindergarten applications and the church's capital campaign to notice the way money moved through our accounts. The way Kenya's savings account had grown from $3,000 to $38,000 in 8 months. The way Marcus's expense reports started rounding up in perfect increments. The way Meridian Solutions had suddenly started using a new vendor for office supplies. A vendor registered to a P.O. box in Stone Mountain. A vendor whose LLC paperwork listed one Kenya Simone Whitfield as sole proprietor. My sister's full name. Her maiden name. The name she'd kept after her divorce from that no-good construction worker who'd bruised her ribs and stolen her car. I'd helped her file the paperwork. I'd paid for the lawyer. I'd held her hand while she cried about starting over at 32. Starting over with nothing. Starting over while I built my life, my career, my marriage. My perfect, brittle, fraudulent marriage. Jalen was still asleep on the air mattress in the guest room, his little chest rising and falling under the quilt my grandmother had hand-stitched from her old church dresses. The fabric told stories. Hymnals. Sunday service. Baptisms and funerals and revivals. Every patch a memory of salvation. I'd wrapped my son in salvation while his father was damnation, wearing a CFO's smile. I closed the door and walked past the bathroom where Kenya had done her makeup earlier. Her foundation bottle was still on the counter. The Fenty Beauty shade I'd recommended because it matched her undertones perfectly. I'd taught her about undertones. About how to blend. About how to present yourself to the world so they saw you, not their assumptions. I'd built her up while she was tearing me down. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. My office was at the end of the hall. The room Marcus had wanted to make into a nursery for the second child we'd discussed having next year. Jalen would be 6. Old enough to help. Old enough to understand. But the promotion had kept Marcus traveling. And I'd been up for partner at the firm. And Kenya had been going through her divorce. And life had gotten in the way. That's what we told ourselves. Life got in the way. Not that he'd gotten in her way. Not that she'd gotten in his pants. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer where I kept Jalen's baby photos and my old tax returns and the flash drive I'd bought at Best Buy 6 months ago. Black Friday sale. 50% off. I'd gone at 5 a.m. because Marcus was still sleeping off the turkey coma and I'd needed to get the good deals. Needed to save money because even though we made good money, Meridian paid him $125 plus bonuses and I was pulling in $95 at the firm. There were always expenses. Private school tuition for Jalen. The mortgage on this 4-bedroom in Alpharetta that was supposed to be our forever home. Kenya's legal fees. Mama's medical bills when her insurance didn't cover everything. The tithe at Ebenezer Baptist where we'd gotten married. Always something. Always counting. That's what I did. I counted. I was the counters. The one who balanced books. Who found discrepancies. Who noticed when the numbers didn't sing the right song. Marcus called it my superpower. Said it was why he fell in love with me. Because I made order out of chaos. Because I saw patterns where others saw noise. I'd seen the pattern in March. When Meridian's Q1 reports showed a 2.3% variance in accounts payable. When Kenya started wearing new shoes. When Marcus's phone got a new password. When the smell of her perfume, Marc Jacobs Daisy, the bottle I'd given her for her birthday, started lingering in his car. Not much. Just a whisper. A ghost of a scent. But I noticed. I always noticed. The flash drive held 6 months of screen recordings. Of bank statements. Of encrypted emails I'd decrypted using a program my friend from grad school designed. Of wire transfers. Of invoices from that fake LLC. Of Marcus authorizing payments. Of Kenya depositing checks. Of them. Of the two of them. Of my husband and my sister. Of the money they'd been stealing. The money they'd been moving. The life they'd been building on the foundation of mine. I hadn't confronted them because I needed it all. Every transaction. Every email. Every lie. I needed the board to see what I saw. Not a jealous wife. Not a scorned woman. Not another angry black woman stereotype for them to dismiss. I needed them to see a pattern. Systematic fraud. A betrayal of shareholders. A violation of fiduciary duty. The kind of thing that gets you indicted. The kind of thing that ruins careers. The kind of thing that makes a man's reputation disappear like smoke. The divorce papers on the dining room table were a gift. Marcus thought he was controlling the narrative. Thought he could pivot from our marriage to his merger without me muddying the waters. Thought he could play the falling out of love card. The we grew apart card. The amicable separation for the sake of our child card. But the card he didn't know I held was the ace. The evidence. The proof that he'd been embezzling from his own company. That he'd used my sister as the fence. That they'd been planning this exit strategy for months. That Valentine's Day trip to Miami? Business expenses. The new landscaping? Invoice through Kenya's fake company. The tuition for that supposed summer camp Jalen never attended? A wire transfer to an offshore account I'd traced to a bank in the Caymans. All of it documented. All of it timestamped. All of it waiting. My phone buzzed. Mama. Probably asking if I wanted her to get Jalen. Probably asking if she should call Pastor Williams. Probably asking what we were going to do. But I didn't answer. I had work to do. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Black Friday. While everyone else was fighting for discounts at Target, the Meridian Solutions board would be reviewing the merger documents. Reviewing executive compensation packages. Reviewing the integrity of their leadership team. And at exactly 8:47 a.m., after Marcus's opening remarks about synergy and growth and shared values, their CFO would receive an email. From me. From an account I'd set up 6 months ago. The subject line would be simple. Financial irregularities requiring immediate board review. The body would be professional. Dry. Just the facts. The kind of language auditors use. The kind that doesn't leave room for emotion or interpretation. Attached would be a zip file. Inside, 37 documents. Bank statements. LLC filings. Email screenshots. Text message logs. Photographs of Marcus and Kenya at the W Hotel. Not intimate photos. Nothing salacious. Just them. Having dinner. Business dinners that were expensed. Just them. At the airport. On the same flights to conferences that only Marcus was supposed to attend. Just them. Evidence of a pattern. Of collusion. Of conspiracy. I didn't have to prove the affair. That was incidental. The board wouldn't care about infidelity. They'd care about the money. About the $3.2 million that had moved through Kenya's shell company in 8 months. About the contracts she'd won without competitive bidding. About the fact that Marcus had authorized every single one while claiming to the board that he was reducing vendor costs by 12%. The divorce papers were his attempt to get ahead of it. To make me the bitter ex-wife. To discredit anything I might say. To position himself as the reasonable one. The one who'd fallen in love, couldn't help it, wanted to make things right. But I had the actual paper trail. And I had something else. Something I'd discovered last week. Something that made the embezzlement look like a parking ticket. Kenya wasn't just stealing from Meridian. She was stealing from the church. From Ebenezer's building fund. The capital campaign I'd chaired. The one where we'd raised $2.8 million to repair the historic sanctuary. The one where Kenya had volunteered to manage the accounting because she was family. Because she was trustworthy. Because blood is thicker than water. Blood. The same blood that ran through our veins. The blood that connected us to Mama. To Grandma. To all the women who'd survived by counting pennies and praying hard and trusting family when the world proved untrustworthy. The church's money had moved through the same LLC. The same accounts. The same wire transfers. $300,000. Gone. Spent on Marcus's Mercedes down payment. On Kenya's condo in Midtown. On the diamond bracelet I'd seen her wearing last Sunday at service. The one she said was cubic zirconia from Etsy. The one that I now knew was 2 carats and cost $12,000. Pastor Williams would be devastated. The congregation would be shattered. The headlines would be brutal. Prominent black business leader and sister-in-law indicted for embezzlement from church and corporation. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution would have a field day. The blogs would be worse. They'd drag our family name through every kind of mud. They'd question whether all those Sunday sermons about prosperity had been a setup. They'd ask if this was what successful black families did. If we were all frauds. Maybe we were. Maybe success had been the disguise. Maybe the house in Alpharetta and the Mercedes and the ski trips to Colorado and the private school tuition had all been part of the costume. The costume of having made it. Of being respectable. Of being different from the ones left behind in the neighborhoods where police sirens sing lullabies and the corner store sells Lucy's and dreams die by 25. I'd bought the costume. Worn it proudly. Posted the Christmas card photos on Facebook. Marcus in his sweater, me in my matching one, Jalen in the center with that gap-toothed grin. The perfect black family. The proof that education worked. That hard work paid off. That we'd escaped the statistics. But the numbers don't lie. The numbers are honest even when people aren't. And the numbers showed that my perfect life was a deficit. That my marriage was a loss. That my sister was a liability I'd been carrying for years. I opened my laptop. The password was Jalen's birthday plus the word blessed. I typed it so many times it was muscle memory. The desktop background was a photo from our vacation to Martha's Vineyard. The one where we'd rented that house in Oak Bluffs. The black elite. The summer homes. The legacy. The picture showed us on the beach, Jalen between us, the sunset making everyone glow. We looked happy. We looked whole. We looked like we belonged. I pulled up the folder marked Tax Docs 2023. Inside, another folder marked Medical. Inside that, a PDF that looked like an insurance claim but was actually the summary of every transaction. I'd learned to hide things in plain sight. From Marcus. From Kenya. From myself. If you want to keep a secret, make it boring. Make it look like something no one would ever want to open. My phone buzzed again. Kenya this time. The preview showed just her name in the beginning of a text. Aaliyah, please, I can explain. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. There was nothing she could say that would unspend the money. Unfuck my husband. Unbreak the trust. Unshatter Jalen's family. Instead I drafted the email. Professional. Precise. The kind of email that gets forwarded to legal teams and forensic accountants and eventually to the FBI. Because wire fraud is a federal crime. Because embezzlement across state lines triggers federal jurisdiction. Because the Cayman's account meant international banking violations. I'd learned all this in the past 6 months. Night school. Online courses. Webinars for forensic accountants. I'd become an expert in the crimes my husband was committing. I'd been taking notes. Saving screenshots. Building a case while he thought I was building his life. The irony wasn't lost on me. He taught me to be detail-oriented. To chase discrepancies. To trust the numbers more than the narrative. He'd created the perfect wife to catch his perfect crime. Tomorrow morning, while he presented his merger strategy, while he talked about operational efficiency and cost synergies, the board would receive my gift. The truth, wrapped in Excel spreadsheets and time-stamped receipts. They'd have to act. The SEC regulations were clear. Material financial misconduct must be disclosed. Executive officers must be dismissed pending investigation. The merger would be delayed. The stock price would drop. Marcus's golden parachute would evaporate. And then the church. I'd scheduled a separate email. To the deacon board. To Pastor Williams. To the building committee. To arrive at noon. After the board meeting. After the news began to spread. After Marcus's world started collapsing, I'd kick out the second pillar. The one that would make sure he couldn't recover. Couldn't spin it. Couldn't claim it was a misunderstanding. Because he didn't just steal from rich shareholders. He stole from people who'd given their widow's mite. From Mrs. Jenkins who'd been saving for 10 years to donate $5,000. From the Johnson family who'd mortgaged their house to give $50,000 because they believed in legacy. From every person in that sanctuary who'd clapped when the capital campaign thermometer hit its goal. Who'd cried when Pastor Williams said we were building for our children's children. They'd trusted me to steward that money. I trusted my sister. And she'd used that trust to fund her affair with my husband. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. The preview read, "Don't do anything stupid. We can negotiate. Negotiate. Like this was a business deal. Like our marriage was a merger that had run its course. Like Jalen was a division to be split up in the divestiture." I typed my response without thought. The words just appeared. "You have until 8 a.m. to tell the board yourself. Confess everything. Resign. Or I send the files." I hit send. Then I turned off my phone. Pulled the SIM card. Put it in the drawer with Jalen's baby teeth and my old wedding ring from the first week of marriage when I'd lost weight and it slipped off at the grocery store. I'd been so panicked. Marcus had held me and said it was okay, we'd get it resized. That nothing could make us not married. That we were permanent. Permanent. Like the ink on divorce papers. Like the digital trail of crime. Like the scar this would leave on my son's heart. But better a clean cut than a slow infection. Better one devastating Thanksgiving than years of watching his parents lie to each other. Better to be the woman who ended it than the woman who let it fester. Downstairs I heard Mama's voice rising. Heard Kenya crying now finally. Heard the back door slam. Heard a car start. Marcus leaving. Probably heading to the W Hotel. Probably calling his lawyer. Probably realizing that the woman he'd married wasn't just a good accountant. He was a great one. The kind who never loses receipts. The kind who remembers every transaction. The kind who, when pushed, doesn't just push back. She files a 10K with the evidence attached. I pulled up the final file. The one I'd been saving. The spreadsheet that showed everything. Every dollar. Every date. Every connection. It was beautiful in its precision. A work of art, really. The story of a marriage in numbers. The story of a betrayal in debits and credits. The story of a woman who'd been underestimated for so long that she'd become dangerous. At the bottom I'd written a note. For the lawyers. For the board. For anyone who needed to understand why I'd waited. Why I'd gathered evidence instead of confronting them. Why I'd chosen Thanksgiving. I wrote, my grandmother used to say you don't stir the pot until the gumbo's done. You let all the flavors cook together. You let the rice absorb the stock. You wait. And when it's ready, when everything's tender and the truth is in the liquid, you serve it hot. You serve it all at once. And you make sure everyone gets a full portion. 6 months I'd been cooking this gumbo. 6 months of collecting ingredients. Of chopping vegetables. Of simmering the truth. And now it was done. Now it was ready. Now it was time to serve. I saved the file. Closed the laptop. Stood and walked to the window that overlooked our driveway. Marcus's Mercedes was gone. Kenya's Audi was gone. Just Mama's old Toyota Camry sitting there like a faithful witness. The car that had driven me to Spelman. That had driven Kenya to her first job at the mall. That had driven Mama to every double shift at Grady. That had outlasted 3 husbands, 2 recessions and now 1 catastrophic Thanksgiving. The sun was setting. The sky, that particular shade of Atlanta orange pink that made you think God was a southern woman who knew about color coordination. Down the street, other families were finishing their meals. Arguing about football. Planning Black Friday shopping trips. Living normal lives. Our life would never be normal again. But maybe it never had been. Maybe normal was just the costume we wore while the numbers told the real story. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Mama. She appeared in the doorway, her face a map of every disappointment she'd ever survived. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She just looked at the laptop, at the papers I'd left on the desk, at the flash drive sitting next to Jalen's baby photos. You gonna burn the whole house down, baby? She asked. Her voice was soft. Not angry. Just tired. The way she got after Daddy's 3rd arrest. After Kenya's divorce. After Grandma's funeral. I looked at her. Really looked at this woman who'd raised me to believe family was everything. To protect your people. To keep business in the house. To never give white folks or the police or anyone else a reason to talk bad about us. Yes, Mama, I said. Because sometimes the only way to get rid of termites is to set the foundation on fire. She nodded. Like she understood. Like she'd maybe understood before I did. Like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to the truth she'd seen in her daughter's eyes 6 months ago when Kenya had shown up to church with that bracelet. When Mama had asked where she'd gotten it and Kenya had stuttered something about a bonus. Mama walked over and picked up the flash drive. Turned it in her fingers. It was black. Unremarkable. The kind you buy in a 3-pack at Staples. You know what happens after fire? She asked. And ash is good for growing things. New things. Then she set the flash drive back down. Patted my shoulder. The way she used to when I'd brought home a perfect report card. When I'd gotten into Spelman. When I'd passed the CPA exam on the first try. She'd always known I was the one who could handle the numbers. The one who could survive the truth. Downstairs the front door opened. More footsteps. Darius. Uncle Joe. They'd been watching the game. Had probably seen Marcus leave. Had probably seen Kenya peel out of the driveway like the devil was chasing her. They stood in the hallway, big men who'd played football at HBCUs, who'd built careers as engineers and teachers, who'd survived their own marriages and divorces and disappointments. Leah, Darius said. You need us to handle something? They meant violence. They meant confrontation. They meant the kind of family justice that doesn't involve courts or lawyers or spreadsheets. No, I said. I already handled it. As I had. 6 months ago when I first saw the pattern. When I first realized my husband and my sister were not just betraying me but betraying everything. I'd started handling it then. Not with shouting. Not with threats. Not with tears. With numbers. With evidence. With the methodical patience of a woman who'd been underestimated her entire life. Uncle Joe nodded. He'd been a math teacher for 30 years. He understood about patterns. About how once you see them you can't unsee them. About how the truth has a way of adding up. We're gonna stay, he said. In case you need witnesses. In case he comes back. In case things get legal. They would. By morning. When the board received my email. When the stock price started to drop. When the lawyers started calling. When the FBI opened a file. Things would get very legal very fast. But for now I had tonight. One night of quiet before the explosion. I walked back to the window. The sky had deepened to purple. The streetlights were coming on. In the distance I could hear the highway. The constant hum of Atlanta. The city that had been built by black hands. By survivors. By people who knew how to rebuild after everything burned. My phone was still off. I'd keep it off until morning. Let them wonder. Let them panic. Let them try to cover their tracks. Let them scramble. Every move they made would be another data point. Another piece of evidence. Another number in my spreadsheet. Jalen would wake up soon. He'd be confused. He'd cry. He'd ask where Daddy was. Where Auntie Kenya was. I'd have to explain in words a 5-year-old could understand. I'd have to tell him that sometimes the people you love make choices that hurt you. That love doesn't mean letting people hurt you. That family is about who shows up, not just who shares your blood. Mama came back with a plate. Heated up the food I'd barely touched. Mac and cheese. Collards. Turkey. She'd even put a slice of Kenya's pie on there, though I didn't know how she could stand to look at it. But that was Mama. She didn't waste food. She didn't waste anything. She knew what it cost. What everything cost. She said, "You need your strength." So I ate. Sitting at my desk, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's crimes and my sister's betrayal, I ate my Thanksgiving dinner. The mac and cheese was perfect. The cheese sauce smooth, the top crispy just the way I liked it. The collards had that hint of smoked turkey that Grandma taught me. The sweet potato pie was too sweet. Kenya always used too much sugar. I'd told her. She'd said I was being critical. That not everything had to be perfect. That some people like things sweet. She'd been talking about more than pie. When I was done I saved my work. Closed my laptop. Put the flash drive in my purse. The one Marcus had bought me for Mother's Day. Coach. He'd spent $700. I'd found the receipt. He'd paid cash. Untraceable. Smart. But not smart enough. Downstairs Darius and Uncle Joe were cleaning up. Loading dishes into the dishwasher. Putting away leftovers. The way men do when they don't know what else to do. When they want to help but words fail them. Mama was on the porch swing, her phone to her ear. Probably calling her sister. Probably telling her what had happened. Probably starting the chain of phone calls that would circle through the family like a shockwave. By morning everyone would know. The aunties in Birmingham. The cousins in Dallas. The whole network of black women who'd prayed for my marriage. Who'd celebrated my success. Who'd envied my perfect life. Now they'd know it was never perfect. Just expensive. Jalen's voice floated down the stairs. Small and sleepy. "Mommy?" I went up. Slid into the air mattress beside him. He smelled like little boy and fabric softener and the crackers he'd had before his nap. I sang the song Grandma used to sing. The one about the lamb. The one about being safe. The one about Jesus loving all the little children. The children of the world. Red and yellow, black and white. All precious in his sight. But some children grow up to be adults who make terrible choices. Who hurt the people who love them. Who confuse greed for love. Who burn down houses and call it passion. Jalen fell back asleep. I stayed until his breathing settled. Then I went to my room. The master bedroom. The one with the king-size bed and the walk-in closet and the en-suite bathroom with the soaking tub I'd used exactly twice because who had time for baths? The room where Marcus had slept beside me for 10 years. Where he'd held me when I miscarried before Jalen. Where we'd planned our future. Where he'd whispered promises that were now ash. The closet still smelled of his cologne. Tom Ford. $80 a bottle. He'd started wearing more of it in the past 6 months. Covering something. The scent of another woman's shampoo. The smell of his own guilt. I packed a bag for me and Jalen. Not much. Clothes for 3 days. Jalen's favorite toys. The important documents. Birth certificates, passports, Jalen's medical records. The things you grab when you're leaving and you don't know when you're coming back. When you're running from a fire you set yourself. As I was leaving. Tonight. Mama would stay. Darius and Uncle Joe would stay. They'd be the witnesses. The ones who could say I'd been calm. Rational. In control. That I hadn't made threats. That I'd simply gathered my child and left while my husband was God knows where, doing God knows what. That I'd acted in Jalen's best interest. That I'd been the stable parent. The bag went by the door. The laptop went in its case. The evidence went in my purse. Jalen's car seat was already in my car. I'd parked behind the garage where no one could see. Where I could leave without an audience. Without confrontation. Without giving them anything they could use against me. At midnight I woke Jalen. Wrapped him in his coat and the quilt from Grandma. Carried him downstairs. He didn't fully wake, just curled into my shoulder the way he had as a baby. The way I'd held him through colic and fevers and nightmares. The way I'd protect him from this nightmare too. Mama was still on the porch swing. She stood when she saw us. Came inside. Kissed Jalen's head. Kissed my cheek. Her lips were dry. Papery. Like old leaves. Like the pages of Grandma's Bible that she'd underlined and dog-eared until the words were more her own than the original text. Where you going? She asked. To the truth, I said. Jalen and I are going to live in the truth. She nodded, understanding what I meant. That we couldn't stay in this house that was built on lies. That the truth was a place, not just a concept. That you had to physically remove yourself from the fiction before you could heal. You call me when it's done, she said. When the dust settles. When you know what's next. I promised I would. Then I walked out. Into the cold November night. Into the Black Friday morning that would change everything. Into the truth that I'd been carrying alone for 6 months. The drive to Mama's house took 30 minutes. To the old neighborhood. To the place I'd escaped. To the projects that weren't projects anymore. Just regular apartments that regular people could barely afford. But Mama's unit was paid off. Had been since her mother died and left her the insurance money. It was small. 2 bedrooms. But it was clean. It was safe. It was real. Jalen slept on the couch while I set up his air mattress in what used to be my bedroom. The walls were still painted the lavender I'd chosen at 16. The same poster of Maya Angelou still hung over the desk where I'd done homework. The same photograph of Grandma in her church hat still watched from the dresser. I plugged in my laptop. Connected to Mama's Wi-Fi. Checked the email I'd scheduled. It was queued. Waiting. Set to send at exactly 8:47 a.m. I thought about changing it. About not going through with it. About finding some other way. About protecting the family name. But the family name was already ruined. Marcus and Kenya had seen to that. I was just making sure the right people knew why. I pulled up a new document. Started typing. Not evidence. Not numbers. A letter. To Jalen. For when he was older. When he asked questions. When he wanted to know why his father went to prison. Why his auntie disappeared. Why we lived with Grandma. Why we were broke after having so much. I wrote about love. About how real love doesn't steal. Doesn't lie. Doesn't choose convenience over commitment. I wrote about how his father had loved us once but had forgotten what that meant. How his auntie had loved me once but had chosen herself. How sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protecting from. I wrote about how I would always choose him. Always. Even when it meant destroying everything else. Especially then. At 3 a.m. I slept. For 2 hours. Woke to my alarm. Made coffee in Mama's old percolator. The smell brought back every morning of my childhood. The sound of Mama getting ready for work. The radio playing gospel. The certainty that someone was handling business. That bills would get paid. That we would survive. I checked my phone. Turned it on. 23 texts. 14 from Marcus. Increasingly frantic. Threatening. Pleading. Saying I was overreacting. Saying we could work it out. Saying he loved me. Saying he was sorry. Saying I was ruining his life. 9 from Kenya. Crying. Apologizing. Saying it wasn't what I thought. Saying she was confused. Saying Marcus had manipulated her. Saying she needed help. Saying I was her sister. Saying blood was thicker than water. 1 from Mama. Just I love you. Do what you gotta do. Jalen is safe with us. And 1 from a number I didn't recognize. A 404 area code. The preview read, "This is Detective Rollins with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss the documents you sent." I hadn't sent anything to the FBI. Yet. That was supposed to be step 2. After the board. After the church. After the public unraveling. My finger hovered over the message. But before I could open it, another text came through. From Marcus's work number. The one I'd programmed into my phone as Meridian Main. But this wasn't from the main line. It was from his direct extension. It read, "Aaliyah, I'm at the office. The board got your email. They're calling it a hostile act. They're saying you fabricated evidence. They're saying I can press charges for corporate espionage, for theft of company property, for violation of non-disclosure agreements. You need to call me. We can fix this. I can make this go away. But you have to stop. Right now. Before you lose everything. Before I lose everything. I laughed. The sound startled me. Jalen stirred on his mattress. I went to him, smoothed his hair, kissed his forehead. He settled. I returned to the kitchen. To the coffee. To the phone that kept buzzing. Another text. From Kenya. A picture this time. Of her and Marcus. At the office. Standing in front of the conference room glass. Behind them I could see the board members. The lawyers. The serious faces. The crisis meeting. The emergency session called because the CFO's wife had just accused him of embezzlement. They looked scared. Good. But then I saw something else in the photo. Something in the background. A figure I recognized. My mother. Standing in the hallway of Meridian Solutions. Wearing her church suit. The one she only wore for special occasions. For funerals. For when someone needed to be buried. What was Mama doing at Marcus's office? My phone rang. Not a text. A call. Mama's number. I answered. Baby, she said. Her voice was different. Not the tired, disappointed tone from last night. This was her business voice. Her I am the matriarch and I am handling this voice. Mama, what are you doing at Meridian? There was a pause. Then, I'm here to make sure they understand who they're dealing with. I'm here to remind them that your husband didn't become successful by himself. That my daughter worked double shifts to put him through grad school. That my daughter managed his household while he built his career. That my daughter is not some angry black woman making accusations. She's a professional, an expert, a mother protecting her child. And she has receipts. Mama, I said you need to leave. This is legal now. This is serious. It was always serious, she said. But they think they can intimidate you. They think because you're young and black and a woman you'll back down. They think because they have lawyers and suits and power you'll disappear. But I'm here to tell them you have a family. You have a community. You have a church. You have a legacy. And we don't disappear. We don't back down. We don't let our children be ruined by men who think they can take what they want and leave what they don't. Another voice in the background. A man's voice. Authoritative. Detective Rollins. Mrs. Whitfield, the voice said, you can't be in here. This is a private meeting. But I have something to say to that board. And to your son-in-law. Mama wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to them. I could hear her through the phone and through the conference room door that must have been opened. I could hear the acoustics of that room where Marcus had given presentations. Where he'd been praised. Where he'd been promoted. Let me tell you something about my daughter, Mama was saying. She grew up counting pennies in a house where we sometimes didn't have enough for electricity. She learned to make a dollar stretch so far it could wrap around the whole family. She put herself through school while working full-time. He built a career while raising a son. She kept your CFO's household running while he was busy becoming important. And she did it all while being the kind of woman who notices everything. Who remembers everything. Who documents everything. So when she tells you there's $3.2 million missing, you better believe her. When she tells you she's got proof, you better listen. And when she tells you she's not going away, you better understand that she's not just speaking for herself. She's speaking for every woman who's been told to be grateful for a man's success while he steals from under her nose. For every sister who's been betrayed. For every mother who's had to protect her child from the man who helped make him. A man's voice. Marcus. Leah, please. Tell her to stop. This is making it worse. Making it worse for who? Mama asked. For you. Or for the truth? The truth. There it was. The word I'd been avoiding. The word that had kept me up nights. The word that had made me document instead of scream. Because the truth wasn't just that Marcus had cheated. Wasn't just that Kenya had betrayed me. Wasn't just that $3.2 million had disappeared. The truth was that I'd known. Not consciously. Not at first. But somewhere deep where the numbers live, I'd known. The moment Kenya's account started growing. The moment Marcus started working later. The moment the scent of her perfume appeared in his car. I'd known. But I had to be sure. I had to have proof. Because black women can't afford to be wrong. We can't afford to be emotional. We can't afford to make accusations we can't back up. The world doesn't give us the benefit of doubt. It gives us stereotypes. It gives us angry. It gives us bitter. It gives us crazy. So I'd waited. I'd counted. I'd documented. I'd built a case so airtight, so undeniable that when I finally spoke no one could dismiss me. And now Mama was speaking for me. In that boardroom. In front of those white men in their expensive suits who'd promoted Marcus because he looked like them, talked like them, had the right credentials, the right polish, the right wife at the right events, smiling the right smile, wearing the right dress, saying the right things about supporting his career. They hadn't seen the woman who balanced their books, who found their errors, who kept their secrets. They'd seen the accessory, the proof that Marcus Carter had arrived. A successful black man with a successful black wife and a beautiful son and a house in Alpharetta and a place at the table. But tables can be overturned. And this one was about to flip. Through the phone I heard Detective Rollins again. "Mrs. Carter, are you on the line?" I didn't answer. Let them wonder. Let them imagine me in my power. Let them think I was somewhere pulling strings. Let them believe I was the puppet master they'd underestimated. As I was. I hung up. Turned the phone off again. Removed the SIM card. Put it in my purse next to the flash drive. Jalen was stirring. I went to him. Held him. Explained in the simplest terms that we were going to stay with Grandma for a while. That Daddy had to work. That Auntie Kenya was sick. That everything would be okay. He accepted it. Children do. They trust their mothers. Even when their mothers are lying to protect them from truths they're too young to hold. I held him until he fell back asleep. Then I sat at the kitchen table with Mama's old laptop. The one I'd bought her 3 Christmases ago. The one she'd only used for Facebook and watching church services online. I drafted another email. This one to my own law firm. To the managing partner. To the woman who'd mentored me. Who'd taught me about leverage. About timing. About never showing your hand until the pot was big enough to change your life. The email was simple. I will not be in today. Or tomorrow. I am taking leave to handle a family matter. I have documentation that may be of interest to the firm's white-collar defense division. I will be in touch when the dust settles. Then I pulled up the news. Local Atlanta stations were already running the story. Breaking. Meridian Solutions CFO under investigation following allegations of embezzlement. The screen showed Marcus leaving the office building, surrounded by lawyers, his face a mask of controlled rage. The kind of mask that cracks eventually. The reporter was a young black woman. Standing in front of Meridian's Midtown headquarters. She looked serious. Professional. She was saying, "Sources tell us the allegations come from the CFO's wife, a certified public accountant with the prominent firm of Henderson and Associates. The allegations involve millions in fraudulent vendor payments and an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My name wasn't mentioned. Yet. But it would be. I checked Kenya's social media. She deleted her accounts. Or maybe they'd been deleted for her. But the internet doesn't forget. Screenshots were already circulating. Her with Marcus at corporate events. Her with the Mercedes. Her in the Midtown condo. Her wearing the bracelet. Her living the life I'd built for her. The life she'd stolen from me. The comments were brutal. Gold digger. Homewrecker. Thief. The kind of words black women call other black women when we want to distance ourselves from the shame. When we want to believe we would never. Could never. But we could. We do. We are human. We are flawed. We are capable of monstrous things even to our own sisters. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on. A text from a number I didn't recognize. The message. "Mrs. Carter, this is Detective Rollins again. We need you to come in. Not as a suspect. As a witness. Your documentation is compelling. But we need your statement. We need to understand the full scope. We need to know you're safe." Safe. The word made me laugh again. Was I safe? I just detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. I'd exposed crimes that would send my husband and my sister to prison. I'd destroyed my family's reputation. I'd become a headline. A cautionary tale. A angry black woman stereotype come to life. Even though I'd been so careful, so methodical, so perfectly professional. But maybe that was the real crime. That no matter how perfect I was, no matter how careful, no matter how right, I'd still be reduced to a trope. To a meme. To a story people would tell at dinner parties about that crazy accountant who took down her own husband. Except I wasn't crazy. I was precise. I was accurate. I was right. I texted back, I will come in at 2 p.m. I will bring my documentation. I will give my statement. But first I need to take my son to school. I need to buy groceries. I need to live my life. The response was immediate. Understood. We will have agents meet you at Henderson and Associates at 2. We have already secured your employment records. We have already reviewed your documentation. Your cooperation will be noted. Cooperation. Like I was doing them a favor. Like they weren't doing their job 6 months too late. Like I hadn't done all the work for them. But fine. Cooperation. I could cooperate. Jalen woke up for real at 7. We got ready. I made him breakfast. Pancakes from a mix. Syrup. The kind of normal morning that would ground him. That would make this day feel like any other. He didn't ask about Daddy. He didn't ask about Auntie Kenya. He just ate and talked about show and tell at school. About his friend Malik who was bringing his gecko. About how he wanted to be a scientist when he grew up. I drove him to school. The private school we could no longer afford. The one where the tuition was due next week. The one where all the other parents were Meridian executives and doctors and lawyers. The one where Marcus's name would be mud by pickup time. I kissed him goodbye. Watched him walk into the building with his backpack, his little shoulders straight, his head high. He had no idea his world was collapsing. That by afternoon his father would be suspended. That his auntie would be named in federal documents. That his mother would be the subject of a financial crimes investigation. But he also had no idea that I had a plan. That I had documentation. That I had truth. That I had the power that comes from being right. I drove to Henderson and Associates. The building was downtown. Glass and steel. The kind of place where powerful decisions get made. Where my boss, Margaret Henderson, had built an empire from nothing. Where she understood about being underestimated. About having to be twice as good. About having to document everything. She was waiting in her office. Not angry. Not surprised. Just waiting. Leah, she said. Sit. I sat. He poured coffee. Real coffee. Not the Keurig stuff. The kind that takes time. I assume you have a good reason for disappearing during our busiest quarter, she said. I assume you have a good reason for making your soon-to-be ex-husband the lead story on the morning news. I slid a folder across her desk. The summary version. The highlights. The greatest hits of Marcus and Kenya's criminal enterprise. She read. Didn't react. Just read. When she was done, she closed the folder. Looked at me. You've been busy, she said. I've been accurate, I said. She nodded. That's what I taught you. Accuracy over emotion. Evidence over conjecture. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss everyone off. Margaret Henderson had been my mentor for 8 years. She'd seen me through wedding planning. Through pregnancy. Through maternity leave. Through every professional milestone. She'd also been through her own divorce. From a man who'd tried to take everything. She'd won. Because she had documentation. Because she was precise. Because she was right. The firm will represent you, she said. Pro bono. We will not let Meridian's lawyers paint you as a disgruntled wife. You are a whistleblower. You are a protected witness. You are a hero. Hero. The word landed wrong. I wasn't a hero. I was a woman who'd been hurt and had chosen documentation over devastation. But I would take the protection. I would take the representation. I would take the shield of Henderson and Associates between me and the wolves. Detective Rollins arrived at 1:45. 2 agents with him. Both black. A man and a woman. Young. Professional. They didn't treat me like a suspect. They treated me like a colleague. Like someone who'd done their job for them. We reviewed the documentation. All 37 files. They asked questions. I answered. Precisely. Accurately. Without emotion. Without crying. Without the performance they might have expected. The female agent, Special Agent Davis, looked up from her notes. Mrs. Carter, she said. Can I ask you something? Why no? Why Thanksgiving? I thought about the cranberry sauce. About the mac and cheese. About the way Marcus had looked at me over the table like I was a problem to be solved. About how Kenya had turned her back to hide her guilt. Because that's when they served me the bill, I said. And I decided to pay it with interest. They nodded. Understood. Maybe they'd been at similar tables. Maybe they'd watched their own families fracture. Maybe they'd learned that timing is everything. When we were done, Margaret walked them out. She came back with a bottle of water. Sat across from me. You're suspended, she said. With full pay. Until this is resolved. It's for the best. You need to focus on Jalen. On staying safe. On healing. Healing. The word I'd been avoiding. The thing I wasn't sure I could afford yet. The luxury that would have to wait until the dust settled. But Margaret was right. Jalen needed me whole. Not just functional. I've arranged for a therapist, she said. Dr. Patricia Williams. She specializes in family trauma. She sees a lot of our clients. A lot of Black women who've had to choose between their sanity and their family's reputation. I started to protest. To say I was fine. That I didn't need therapy. That I was strong. That I was a Black woman and we don't break. But Margaret held up her hand. Strength isn't about not breaking, she said. It's about knowing when to let someone help you put the pieces back together. You just burned your life down. Now you have to build something new. You can't do that with only anger as a blueprint. He was right. I took Dr. Williams's number. Promised to call. Then I left. Drove back to Mama's. To Jalen. To the small bedroom with lavender walls. To the reality I'd created by being precise. By being accurate. By being right. The news was on when I got there. Marcus being led to a car. Not in handcuffs. Not yet. But surrounded by lawyers. His face was the mask again. Controlled. Professional. But his eyes were wild. The eyes of a man who'd realized his wife wasn't who he thought she was. That she was more. That she was dangerous. Kenya was on the screen too. Being interviewed. Not by police. By a news crew. Crying. Saying she'd been manipulated. Saying Marcus had pressured her. Saying she'd been vulnerable after her divorce. Saying she was sorry. So sorry. The anchor was a white woman with sympathetic eyes. She was saying, a tragic story of family betrayal. A cautionary tale of success and its costs. I turned it off. Couldn't watch. Couldn't listen to Kenya rewrite the narrative. Make herself the victim. Make Marcus the villain. Make me the scorned wife who'd overreacted. But maybe she was the victim. Maybe we all were. Maybe Marcus was. Maybe the system was. Maybe success had demanded too much. Maybe the pressure to be perfect, to be the exceptional Black family, to be the proof that we belong in Alpharetta and Midtown and corporate boardrooms, had broken something in all of us. I opened my laptop. Not to document crimes. Not to build cases. But to write. To tell the story. To put it in my own words before the media, the blogs, the whispers, got to shape it without me. I wrote about Thanksgiving. About the cranberry sauce. About the mac and cheese. About the divorce papers. About the evidence. About the board meeting. About Mama in that conference room. About Jalen's gap-toothed grin. About being precise. About being right. About being a Black woman who chose truth over reputation. Justice over silence. Healing over hate. I wrote about the cost. The public humiliation. The private grief. The way my son looked at me now like I was both his mother and his protector. The way Mama looked at me like I'd become the woman she'd raised me to be. The way I looked at myself in the mirror. Finally seeing someone who didn't have to be perfect to be powerful. I wrote about the receipts. About how the numbers don't lie. About how the truth will set you free but first it will break your heart. About how sometimes the bravest thing is not to burn it all down but to build it back up. Better. Stronger. Truer. I wrote about sisterhood. About how Kenya and I might never reconcile. About how that was okay. About how forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. About how you can love someone and still choose to never see them again. About how blood is thicker than water but truth is thicker than both. I wrote about Marcus. About how he'd have to live with what he'd done. About how Jalen would grow up knowing his father made mistakes but tried to fix them. About how that was more honest than pretending perfection. About how our son would learn that men can fall and rise. That accountability is possible. That love can survive truth if you're willing to work for it. I wrote about the therapy. About Dr. Williams and her questions. About the slow, painful process of trusting myself again. Of trusting others. Of believing that I could be loved for who I am, not for what I could provide. That I could be seen, not just showcased. It was midnight when I finished. 10,000 words. The story. My story. Not just the hook, not just the explosion, but the aftermath. The healing. The transformation. I saved it. Not on a flash drive hidden in a drawer. Not in a folder marked tax docs. Just a document on my desktop. Labeled, The Truth. Version 1. Because there would be more versions. Because healing is revision. Because every day I would rewrite the story, adding new details, new understandings, new layers of meaning. Because I was no longer just the woman who'd been betrayed. I was the woman who'd chosen truth. The woman who'd protected her child. The woman who'd stood in the fire and walked out with receipts and a plan. I closed the laptop. Looked out at the city. At the lights. At the future. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I didn't know. Leah, it read. This is Kenya. I'm at the airport. I'm leaving. Going to stay with our cousin in Dallas. I know you said 5 years. I'll make it 10. I'll make it forever if that's what you need. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. For all of it. For choosing him over you. For choosing money over family. For being the little sister who wanted what you had instead of being grateful for what you gave me. The money is gone. Spent. But I'll find a way to pay it back. Even if it takes the rest of my life. Because you were right. The numbers don't lie. And the biggest number is the one that shows how much I owe you. Not just money. Everything. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete the text. I saved it. Another receipt. Another piece of evidence. Not for the FBI. For myself. For the day when I might need to remember that she finally told the truth. That she finally saw what she'd done. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. But it does require truth. And she'd finally spoken it. I turned off my phone. Went to Jalen's room. Crawled into his bed. Held him while he slept. Breathed in his little boy smell. His trust. His love. His unbroken heart. The story wasn't over. The investigation would continue. The trials would happen. The public would move on to the next scandal. But we would be here. In this apartment. In this truth. Building something new. What happens when the woman who burned it all down learns she has the power to build it back up? What happens when the numbers that exposed the crime become the blueprint for a new life? What happens when a black woman chooses herself over the narrative everyone expected her to follow? The answer is, you come back next time. For the rebuilding. For the healing. For the story of how we rise from the ash. Because the truth is just the beginning. The revenge is just the prologue. The real story, the one that matters, is what happens after. And I'm just getting started.